He was killed at the hands of people who hated the hell out of him and killed him because of that, just for the sheer pleasure and because they get away with that.
A grieving mother speaks out after new video evidence reveals the deadly encounter between her son and Louisiana State Police. And
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to see that Governor Edwards has not taken any action on this. I mean, it's clear that they murdered my brother.
And his sister calls out the governor of Illinois for failing to take action in her brother's death. As race relations continue to take center stage, a new poll reveals just how much Americans want to fix the country's race issues. And people are quitting their jobs in droves, folks, and they're not headed to the unemployment line either. A look at what's behind the new movement known as the Great Resignation. BNC Live starts now.
Okay. Oh, Lord Jesus. Oh, Lord. All you was doing was speeding a little bit and run a red light. I was just tired. I'm just tired. Hey, sir. I'm just tired.
Louisiana State Police have released new video evidence in the death of Ronald Green, who died during a traffic stop back in 2019. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones. That police body cam video you just saw shows state troopers attempting to arrest Green after a car accident. In the video, before medical help arrives, you can see Green's car behind the area where an officer is standing over him. Green is lying face down and can be heard screaming and moaning, "Oh God, and I'm sorry." According to the Associated Press, Green was punched and dragged by his ankles that were shackled at the time of the arrest. And tonight we're hearing from his mom.
What we see, the videos that are shown, and they took pleasure in torturing my son. They took pleasure in hurting him, beating and killing him, and letting him stay on the ground, pulling him in shackles. What kind of a human? These are state troopers. This is the behavior that the state of Louisiana, they endorse, because these troopers for 2 years have not been dealt with.
An autopsy found Green had cocaine and alcohol in his system. He also suffered a serious head injury. Green's family says he went into cardiac arrest. So far, 2 of the officers involved have been reprimanded, but no one has been fired or charged. An Illinois man is suing the Springfield Police Department after his toddler daughter's ashes were tested for drugs. Dartavius Barnes says police found a tin metal urn in his car during a traffic stop last April. Barnes says he begged officers not to take the urn and told them it was the remains of his 2-year-old daughter. The child died from neglect and starvation in her mother's home. The mom and her boyfriend are serving 20+ years in prison, and according to court records, the officers named in the lawsuit have denied the allegations. And a new poll shows more Americans are focused on fixing our country's race issue. The numbers coming just days before the anniversary of George Floyd's murder at the knee of a former Minneapolis police officer. BNC's Eric Cox is in Chicago with a look at those numbers.
It's been Eric Cox for BNC.
Our thanks to Eric there. Well, a presidential memorandum is now in place that will expand access to legal representation and the courts. History shows low-income people have long struggled to secure quality access to the legal system, and now President Biden's goal is to improve legal services for lower-income Americans and minorities. FAMU International Law Professor Dr. Jeremy Levitt is with me now to talk about this. Good evening, Dr. Levitt. It's good to have you back with us on BNC.
Great to be with you.
And Dr. Levitt, talk about what this memorandum does and why having this access is so important to Black and brown folks.
Well, what President Biden wants to do is he wants to empower the Department of Justice to use its resources and coordinate with other federal agencies in how it utilizes its funds at the local and state and federal level to ensure that minorities historically discriminated against persons in the country have access to justice. We know and he knows that there's a mass incarceration problem. He knows and we know there's institutionalized racism. these disparities have created a problem and really a lack of credibility in America's criminal justice system. Part of that is that because poor people can't afford lawyers or minorities can't afford lawyers, what he's trying to do is make legal access available to everyone, knowing in doing that he'll take at least a chunk out of the colossal and wicked mass incarceration system in this country.
And you talk about that, how huge of a step is this toward reforming the justice system and advancing racial equity?
I think it's a big step. I mean, what we've had the last 4 years and what we've had now in the first 200 days is quite remarkable. He's quite serious. Obviously, Vice President Kamala Harris, this falls kind of within her bailiwick. They're reinstituting programs and initiatives that were killed under the Trump administration but began in the Obama administration. And one of them was on this issue of access to adequate legal representation. One of the things I found interesting in the memorandum is he actually made reference to the United Nations 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development, which is a principle in Goal 16 to promote a peaceful and inclusive society by providing access to justice and building effective judicial mechanisms. And so I think if he uses the purse string the right way, he can help empower or otherwise help hold states accountable for not allowing equal access to justice.
And Dr. Levitt, why is it that the Trump administration actually cut back on something that was so important?
Because they had no humanity when it came to the mass incarceration of Black and brown people in this country. Donald Trump killed the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Now, when you see that we have some moral leadership there, he's given a mandate to Attorney General Garland to reinstitute the Civil Rights Division. This is why you see more patterns and practice investigations opening up when it comes to police departments, a crackdown at the federal level through the local and state level of deadly police violence. So we're in a new era here where he's trying to repair what was taken apart during the Trump administration and then go further by carrying those aims forward, those aims that were largely incomplete, and assuring that poor people and minorities had access to the court system in a way that would provide justice to them in the same way that whites have had adequate resources to hire lawyers when they find themselves tied up in the criminal justice system.
And now Biden also made a commitment from day one in office, saying he would invest in public defenders and improve access to counsel in civil and criminal proceedings. So far, do you think enough is being done by this administration to get that done?
It's too early to tell. I think this administration was very large on platitudes. And now we have to move past the platitudes to see how we're going to implement these changes. Obviously, most people encounter the criminal justice at the local and state level. So if they're not willing to carry a big stick and carrots and really push for the kind of reform at the local and state level, if you go to any city in the union, what you'll find is grave disparities in the way that African Americans, Latinos, and others are arrested compared to whites. Obviously, disparate sentencing, disparate charging. So hopefully, by hiring a new battery of public defenders, encouraging the utilization of resources at the highest level, the presidential level, will provide people with the kind of representation they need. But the jury's out, and I won't celebrate or clap my hands until I see implementation across the nation, and particularly this administration willing to hold local and state government accountable.
And so here's another thing he pointed out, Dr. Levitt, in that memorandum. He said he'd have Attorney General Merrick Garland submit a plan to expand the Department of Justice's access to justice work. How will this in particular impact Black and brown people across the nation?
Well, he's going to have to study the issue and issue a report on how he's going to implement this memorandum across the federal government. And that's that's a colossal task. We don't know how it's going to impact, but the intent is, and I think the intent of this administration is to move an agenda of racial equity forward. He's issued several presidential executive orders, a presidential memorandum that don't have the same weight of law. This one, in this case, is a presidential memorandum. And in there, there's references to racial justice. Well, that only means something when people at the local level feel as though the playing field is even when it comes to how they're arrested and charged and defended. So this is a piece of pizza, but it's not the pizza itself. But it could be a piece that could potentially save the lives of those who would enter the criminal justice system, then fight their whole lives to try and clean the record so they can make an adequate living for themselves and their families.
Well, we know he has 120 days to submit that plan according to the president's memorandum. But Dr. Jeremy Levin, we appreciate your time. Thank you for weighing in on this tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, they're calling it the Great Resignation. Up next, a movement that has Black people in corporate spaces taking their power back. Stay with us. Racial inequities continue in the workforce. That's despite education or experience level. According to a 2019 survey by the compensation data and software firm PayScale, Black men earn 87 cents on the dollar than men of other racial groups. Hispanic and Native American men make 4 cents more. Asian men earn the highest at $1.15, earning 15 cents more than white men. Now, the racial pay and promotions gap can make it challenging for Black people to advance, but there's a movement happening that could help maximize our advantage in the corporate arena. And joining me now is Chandria Harris, career development and HR consultant at Higher Cultures. Chandria, welcome back to BNC. It's good to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
So, Chandria, anybody hearing those numbers are alarmed. If you're a Black person, you're like, okay, why aren't we making the same amount of money? But we know it's on the book. So, you know, it looks like 2021 is the year of taking risks as a substantial number of employees are handing in their pink slips. This movement is being coined the Great Resignation. What is causing that?
Yeah, so a number of data and career researchers are finding that the Great Resignation is coming. So a lot of employees will be turning in their pink slips and resigning from roles in search of opportunities to pursue their passions and their interests and to look into their purpose, actually.
And so, you talk about that. I mean, it's not always an easy thing to walk away from a job. So what is kind of that driving force to say, you know what, I can walk away from it and find something else to do?
Yeah, so what researchers is finding is that people are just in search of work-life balance. Like they're looking for that balance and being able to pause during COVID to have access to being productive and doing other things other than just working from 9 to 5 in an office has really created space for employees to really look at what they want to do and pursue passion projects more. So that work-life balance is really what is causing employees to take a look at their full-time job.
And are we seeing this movement across all birth generations? And, when you talk about passion projects, but also needing to make sure you still got a paycheck coming in, what are these people doing? Where are they going? And is there a quest for higher pay?
So there is a quest for higher pay. There's a quest for work-life balance and remote work and hybrid opportunities. Like I mentioned, like that balance is so important. And they're seeking that. So opportunities to work remote, to work hybrid, to receive more vacation days, to do more volunteer work, to pursue their passions. Like employees are really looking for balance and they're trying to find it now.
And so during the pandemic, a lot of folks have gotten a chance to work from home. You just touched on this a moment ago. So some folks are back in the office, but some aren't. But do you find people enjoy the idea of not being, we would say, micromanaged at home as they would in the office space?
I think micromanagement plays a role into that. But one thing that we have noticed while working during COVID is that we can get a lot of work done and do it from home. And so whether it's just doing laundry and finishing a project, just being able to do other things than being at a desk in an office is what people are looking at. And being able to have that balance is what they really like. And so companies who are looking into balance and finding ways to fulfill their employees will be, greater at achieving and retaining them during this Great Resignation.
So would you say it's best for those companies to start looking at ways to long-term let folks stay home instead of bringing them back into the workspace, if you want to keep them?
I think hybrid. Absolutely. I think hybrid is important. I think, not being secluded to a certain time of the day or hours or even going down to a 4-day work week. Research has shown that is actually something that employees like as well. But being flexible is what is important, and that balance is huge.
And what about Black people? How can they maximize from this?
Yes, so Black and brown folks are in high demand. We're a hot commodity right now in the workplace from the United States point of view, and a lot of companies across America have strengthened their DEI initiatives where they are looking to find great talent, to leverage opportunities. Number one, to just apply. Really apply to the opportunity, understand the job description, know your values, know what you add to that team and the potential contribution you can bring, and begin to leverage your salary, looking into your city and your current city and state, and what is the range according to your job sector, whether you're in a public or private or government. Knowing the range of opportunities and salaries in that area will help you leverage and know what is they're looking to pay. And once you know what they're looking to pay and you know what skills you add, you can show up confident and you can show up and demand more money.
And in a space where, like we just mentioned those numbers before about how we typically aren't paid the same, how do they still kind of have that conversation that allows them to know beyond just me being Black or brown and you having to be inclusive, but it's my skill set is the driving force behind why I should get this job and why I should be paid for it?
Absolutely. So you have to know your skill set and be able to share that, right? If you are a master at implementation, a software system, a program initiative, clearly articulate your value. So you have to show up and know what they need so that you can leverage the salary opportunities.
And what advice would you give people right now, if they're planning, they're writing that resignation letter at this moment and thinking about, I'm going to jump on either the bandwagon or I've been dying to do this for a long time. What advice would you give them?
I say really look at the job description, unpack what the needs are, be able to compare and contrast your previous experience to what they need, and show up truly confident, knowing that the work that you've done in the past is going to help you leverage opportunities for promotions, advancements, and in new roles. So you have to really do some research and know what you have and what you can bring to the table.
Yep. Everybody got to know what they bring to the table. I know my skill set. I know you know it too, Chandria. Well, thank you for sharing that with us tonight. We appreciate your time. Welcome back to BNC Live. Well, Beyonce gave us the phrase, girls run the world. Makes me think, who run the world? Girls. Well, now there is a new TV show with the same name. BNC's ANITA Bennett spoke to the team behind that series.
Run the World is created by a Black woman.
I definitely need to watch that. Well, setting boundaries, how big of a role does it play in managing your mental health? After the break, one therapist breaks it down for Mental Health Awareness Month. Plus, coming up in BNC Sports, NBA teams are in the playoffs. We'll tell you how your boys played today. And a big league slugger is tonight's King of the Hill. Our James Hill is up next with your BNC Sports. Sometimes putting boundaries in place may be challenging, but they're so important to make sure you are meeting your own personal needs. It's Self-Care Saturday on BNC, and Dr. Charmaine Jackman shows us how setting boundaries is key to protecting our mental and emotional health. Dr. Jackman, thank you so much for joining us again for Self-Care Saturday. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here as well.
And Dr. Jackman, we talked about this before. We're wrapping up Mental Health Awareness Month. It's the last week of May, and we've learned so much about managing stress and dealing with anxiety. But what about setting boundaries? How does setting boundaries impact your mental health?
Brittany, such a wonderful question. The way that we set boundaries and create limits for ourselves and communicate our needs to other people is such an important part of our emotional well-being, right? So I think setting limits includes knowing our limits, right? So knowing yourself, knowing what your needs are, being willing and able to ask for those needs, and putting yourself first. I think that can be really hard for people to hear sometimes, to put themselves first, because they're often in a caretaking role. But putting yourself first, knowing your limits and communicating your needs actually helps you stay with a positive mood, right? You're not going to be irritable with people when they break those boundaries. So it's such an important part in our emotional well-being and how we function as human beings.
And how does it kind of interrupt your peace of mind when you don't have those boundaries in place and people are allowed to kind of do things to you that may just throw you off mentally?
Yeah, so sometimes when we don't communicate our needs to people, or we operate outside of those limits, it can be really hard for our functioning to be disrupted, right? So for example, I take myself as an example, I need probably about 6 to 7 hours to function well. If I don't have enough sleep, then I tend to be more irritable. I tend to eat unhealthy. I tend to do things that then impact my mood and how I function and how I communicate with others. So if we're not setting those boundaries or operating within our limits, it can really impact how we function. It can impact our mood and impact how satisfied we are with our life or with that day.
And so how do we go about setting those boundaries when you talk about, whether it's, I'm not going to hang around a bunch of people at one time, or I'm going to take these days to have more of a self-care day? What do people need to do to kind of put those in place?
Yeah, I think sometimes people really feel that, what I've noticed, people tend to put other people first. And so they're taking care of other people's needs because they don't want to offend someone, they don't want to make someone angry. But when you operate like that, then you're neglecting your needs, and then people can become resentful. I have seen people, when they neglect their own needs, they become resentful for other people for breaking boundaries that they hadn't really set in the first place. So it's really important to communicate with people, whether it's about going out and hanging out, like if you want to hang with friends, to say, I'm willing to hang out with you, but only if we limit it to this amount of people, right? If it goes beyond that, then I'm going to feel more anxious. I'm not going to feel comfortable. So, but you have to know, again, what your limits are first. And then you have to be comfortable to say with people, this is what I can tolerate.
Yeah.
And to communicate if they have broken those boundaries or limits, to let them know that they've gone beyond the line. Those can be really hard conversations to have, but practicing and, again, knowing that what you need and what you need to function or to feel well, putting that first, can really help you have those conversations with the people in your life.
And so do you need to go through and probably write like a list or something like that? Like, these are the things that I need to put in place to help me feel like I'm in a good mental state.
Thank you so much. That is such a wonderful observation. And yes, we often don't take the time to reflect on our patterns, on the things that we need. So you can do that through journaling. You can talk to a therapist around that. There are lots of journals out there that can help you, prompt you on things that you might need to know, like what are the things that help me be my best self. And it's really about that. And once you know that, then it's going to be easy to set boundaries with the people in your life.
So, Dr. Jackman, what about when you don't set those boundaries, that it causes you to kind of get anxious a bit? Does that impact your level of anxiety?
Yeah, for some people it can, right? Because when you don't have clear boundaries, it means that people will cross those boundaries without your permission. It's almost, think about like having a fence around your house, right? When you have a fence, people know that that's a no pass zone. But if your home, there's no boundary, there's no fence, then people will come and go. And that can lead you to feeling anxious. It can lead you to feel really angry and irritable with people because they've violated parts of your personal space, your emotional space. They may talk to you in ways that you don't like, right? And that can definitely create a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger. But part of it is really for us to be able to, again, know ourselves and then set those clear boundaries with people. And then that's clear for you and for them. When they've crossed the line, you can say, hey, I set this boundary and you crossed the line, and that doesn't feel good for me. And if you're going to continue to be friends or whatever, family members, right? Whoever that person is in your life, a partner, then if you can't respect those boundaries, then I may have to reevaluate our relationship.
And lastly, with this being the final week in May of Mental Health Awareness Week, what's your final self-care and mental health tip for the week?
So we've shared lots of tips this week, and I think it's really important. We talked a lot about, assessing your stress, checking in with yourself. And I think the action step that I love people to do is to put you on the calendar. So schedule some time for you, and that part of it might be spend some time journaling, reflecting, doing something that brings you joy. But I want you to put you on the calendar.
I love that. I am making sure that I do that this week because I am going on vacation. Well, Dr. Jackman, thank you so much for joining us for Self-Care Saturday. Again, we always appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Have a great vacation.
Thank you. I need short songs, swimsuit, whatever I feel like putting on.
Exactly.
Just to enjoy the weather.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think about other places got snow going on. And
yes, there's some places with snow, and then of course we have the rain over in the South Central, and they've been dealing with the flooding, so lots to talk about.
Yes. All right, we'll see you next hour. More news, weather, sports, and entertainment. Stay with us.